Hello and welcome. Hi, my name is Juliet Choi. I am the president and CEO of the Asian and Pacific Islander American Health Forum. I want to welcome our entire audience who's joining us today for the APEX Summit, Striving for Health Equity. It's a real special privilege to introduce our next guest and speaker who really needs no introduction. Congressman Ted Liu represents California's 33rd congressional district in the United States House of Representatives. Congressman Liu is serving in his fourth term in Congress and currently sits on both the House Judiciary Committee and the House Foreign Affairs Committee. He serves as a co-chair of the Democratic Policy Communications Committee and whip of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus. Congressman Liu is a former active duty officer in the United States Air Force, and following active duty, he served in the Air Force Reserve, retiring with the rank of colonel in 2021. In Congress, Congressman Liu has established himself as a leader on the environment, cybersecurity, civil liberties, government ethics, and veterans, and always our friend and champion for all of our communities.
Hello, I'm Congressman Ted Liu from Southern California. Thank you to Apex for inviting me to make a few remarks. Welcome to everyone tuning in to the Moonshot, the latest in cancer research panel. It's an honor to speak alongside these innovative leaders in cancer research and prevention, and I look forward to their insights on this critical topic in healthcare. Cancer touches nearly everyone in their lifetime, whether it is a friend, a mother, a family member, or a coworker. We all know someone who has battled cancer. That is why research in cancer treatment, diagnostics, and prevention is critically important, not just to help find a cure for cancer, but also to understand how the disease affects different communities. Compared to other population groups, AAPIs are the only racial or ethnic group for which cancer, not heart disease, ranks as the leading cause of death. And many cancer-related disparities also exist within our AAPI communities. For example, U.S.-born Vietnamese women are one of the highest risk groups for breast cancer. Their risk of dying from breast cancer is 4 times greater than any other AAPI group. And they are not alone. Other groups experience cancer rates in disproportionately high numbers. Understanding why can help us get closer to a cure. Another key aspect in cancer research is prevention and helping increase access to services that can provide early detection. According to the Centers for Disease Control, Asian American women are 10% less likely to receive mammograms than non-Hispanic white women. Innovative models of care can help these women access early detection and dramatically increase their chances of remission. Establishing access to needed detection and prevention treatment will require overcoming many barriers, including the stigma and the social and cultural barriers many Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders currently face. As a member of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, we have been looking into improving language access, data disaggregation, and additional priorities to mitigate these barriers and advance health equity for all. This is a critically important topic for many of my fellow members, which is why I am a proud member of the Bipartisan Cancer Prevention Caucus, among other working groups on Capitol Hill trying to fight cancer. I'm excited to hear from the range of experts here today and look forward to their insights on cancer prevention and research. Thank you.
Welcome again, everyone. I am so delighted to be serving as your moderator for our first conversation today. Our panel, Moonshot, the latest in cancer research. Some of you may know or not know, 1 in 3 people is diagnosed with cancer at some stage of their life. While the diagnosis can be anxiety-ridden, if not frightening for our families, there are billions of dollars being invested trying to find a cure, new treatments, new way of outreach, innovation, and partnership. I'm so delighted to hear and welcome from our experts today about the latest in the fight against cancer. So let me begin here and introduce our panelists here today, and ask each and every one of them to go ahead and introduce themselves. We have Dr. Neil Palafox, Dr. Jonathan Chang, Dr. Eric Fung, and Dr. Edison Liu. Dr. Palafox, how about you kick us off with your introduction? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juliet. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. Aloha, mai kako, to everyone. Yakwekom. My name is Neil Palafox. I'm with the John Burns School of Medicine, a physician by training, and also with the University of Hawaii Cancer Center. And for the last more than 30 years, I've been working in the Pacific and with Pacific Islanders, U.S. Affiliated Pacific, as well as Pacific Islanders in Hawaii, including Native Hawaiians, Samoans, Tongans, and other Pacific Island migrants. And again, thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Palafox. Dr. Chang.
It's really a pleasure to be here, Julia. Thank you for this exciting opportunity and look forward to the discussion. My name is Jonathan Chang. I'm a medical oncologist by background and still seeing patients at Fox Chase Cancer Center. And I'm the Senior Vice President and Head of Oncologic Clinical Research at Bristol Myers Squibb.
Thank you, Dr. Chang. Dr. Eric Fung.
Yes, thank you so much, Juliet. My name is Eric Fung, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Clinical Development at GRAIL, where I lead our clinical development programs and the efforts to develop a multi-cancer early detection test. And I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dr. Fung. Dr. Edison Liu.
Well, thank you very much, Juliet. I'm previously the president and CEO of the Jackson Laboratory, a genomics and genetics institute in the United States, and the director of its NCI-designated cancer center. Prior to that, I was the executive director of the Genome Institute of Singapore, spent a lot of time in Asia, and then prior to that, I was the scientific director of the Division of Clinical Sciences. I started my career as a medical oncologist, migrated to basic sciences, but at all times was focused on breast cancer as my subspecialty.
Wonderful. Well, welcome again. Thank you, Dr. Liu, and welcome to our panelists. I don't know about all of you. I'm really excited to hear from our experts, learn. Somehow I already feel a little bit healthier and maybe a little bit more informed just knowing that we're sharing this space today. So why don't I kick us off? We want to talk about Continuum of Care. We have a diverse group of leaders here on our panel. And I do have to say, it really makes me smile to see so many esteemed AA NHPI leaders, especially in the cancer frontier. Each and every one of you and your organizations play a critical part of the continuum of care in preventing, diagnosing, and treating cancer. I'd like to start and kick us off by asking each of you to briefly describe how your organizations respectively fit into that continuum of care and what you view as your mission in combating cancer. So I'm going to start with Dr. Liu, especially with your role with the American Cancer Society. How do you see the role of ACS in the continuum of care?
I'm here representing, as a member of the board of the American Cancer Society, which is the largest not-for-profit, non-governmental funding agency, coordinating agency for cancer research, and cancer care. The continuum is exceedingly important for ACS from its inception because we fund, in the tune of nearly $200 million a year, basic clinical prevention studies, and move into implementation, which includes a heavy dose of policy and policy discussions. And finally, very importantly, we actually directly fund patient support systems, including travel, navigation, as well as other aspects of patient care that very frequently is left in the crevices of the healthcare system.
Thank you for that, Dr. Liu. I'm going to turn to Dr. Fung. With GRAIL Bio's mission, and part of your core mission is to detect cancer early when treatments are more effective. Can you talk about the importance of regular screenings and detection for early diagnosis?
Thank you so much, Juliet. It is really an honor to be with you today, participating alongside you and the esteemed panelists. I'd like to thank APEX for today's opportunity and Congressman Liu for kicking off the panel and for his leadership on cancer policy issues, particularly as it relates to ensuring patient access to early detection. And you highlighted GRAIL's mission statement, which is to detect cancer early when it can be cured. And so we've actually been working very closely with leading cancer institutions across the country to pioneer technology that harnesses our deep understanding of genomics and the vast potential of machine learning to detect over 50 types of cancer with a high degree of accuracy. So as you point out, standard of care screening does exist, and we believe that our opportunity to leverage this novel technology by using a simple blood draw as a complement to these existing single cancer screening tests will really enable us to identify new kinds of cancers that are asymptomatic and help bend the mortality curve. And we'll have the opportunity to discuss this in greater detail as this conversation unfolds.
Great, great, great. Dr. Chang, I'm going to turn to you. Bristol-Myers Squibb, BMS for short, has been a leader in therapeutic treatments and leading to breakthrough medicines that have changed survival expectations for patients. What are some of the current efforts BMS is focused on in transforming the treatment landscape?
Yeah, thank you, Julie. And I just want to appreciate the esteemed colleagues here, because I think we all share your comment regarding the mission. The mission is to alleviate the burden of cancer on patients and their family and society. And we all have a role to play in this. From an industry standpoint, and BMS particularly, we aim to provide new and innovative and clinically effective and meaningful treatments for patients suffering for a horrible disease where they have sometimes few or very limited options. Specifically, BMS has been a pioneer and a leader for decades, providing new therapies, whether it's chemotherapy or targeted therapies. And now with the new immunotherapy revolution that has transformed, allowing durable responses, we do appreciate that it takes the larger community to provide advances in this field. Specifically, things that we currently are looking towards may be immunotherapy and its combinations, as well as new checkpoint inhibitors. There is a focus for BMS on developing new therapies like cell-based therapies, these interesting, unique cells called CAR T cells that allow one to be able to provide durable responses for patients with liquid tumors or lymphomas or multiple myelomas. And the third area that BMS is focused on as a leading frontier is in protein homeostasis and degradation. So using multiple myeloma as the learning and exploring the biology has allowed us to develop new therapies that allow targets and proteins to be degraded that are very important for cancers to survive and thrive. So those are just some examples, but it is a wider community, and the research that is being done by both industry and academia and all these partnerships is very important for us to continue to make progress.
Thanks so much, Dr. Chang. And, as we hear from all of you, I'm certainly appreciating that there's some educational opportunities here. And, on behalf of the audience, I can appreciate that you are sharing your expertise. So we may understand some, maybe not everything that you're sharing today, because you are sharing with us the best and the most innovative research and efforts that are underway. So thank you again. I'm going to turn to Dr. Palafox here. Dr. Palafox, especially with your portfolio and your experience as a practitioner serving the Pacific Islander and also the Native Hawaiian communities, and I say that plural, you're often implementing a lot of these efforts and connecting with community leaders, families, and organizations. How can we reconcile cancer treatments with a unique, holistic set of treatments from our communities?
Thank you, Juliet. I come from an academic and a research lens at the School of Medicine and with the UH Cancer Center. So that's the lens I have. Cancer treatments are at the end of the cancer prevention and control continuum, as we know, and all treatment is context specific. So if you look at the continuum from prevention, risk reduction, diagnosis, treatment, palliative care, all of it can be augmented by traditional medicines and community assets. The you know Reconciling this the community's perspective means including the traditional science of the communities and assets into the prevention and treatment protocols, and it's essential for the best outcomes, I believe, and one cannot be separate from the other. In cancer research, this process of reconciling, as you put it, has been formalized through what's called translational research and participatory community engagement approaches. So it's taking the science, the Western interventions that we know, and translating it for and into the community, and vice versa, translating the community science into our Western models. In the translation process, the community assets, the how to do this are understood in a community specific way for each of the, in this case, Pacific Islander communities. So it's including the specific community evidence of treatment and prevention, which you see are the unique holistic treatments for the community, into every Western intervention, and it can be done. It can be formalized into what we call translational research. So that's how we reconcile it in a academic and community-based way. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much for that. I'm going to add that to my list of things I want to learn and hear more about, that phrase translational research. Thank you for that perspective. So I'm going to shift us now to talk about innovation and partnerships. So earlier this month, President Biden reinvigorated his agenda against cancer and announced a goal to reduce the age-adjusted death rate from cancer by 50% over the next 25 years. The naming of a cancer moonshot, coordinator at the White House, and a new quote-unquote cancer cabinet to end cancer as we know it. And for our audience, I think a lot of us know this. This is a very special, unique lens that the White House is providing, I think, all of our communities, taking a whole of government approach to ending cancer and creating this cancer cabinet. So thinking about the cancer moonshot, again, to end cancer, what innovation needs to occur? You've already talked about some core aspects of your mission, but we'd love to hear, what innovation do you think still needs to occur to achieve this goal? Or what type of partnerships are essential? And when we talk about partnerships, I think often, necessarily, by definition, we're talking about public and private partnerships. I think another way I would state this is, why don't we take the next few minutes and curate our own wish list of what kind of innovation do you think needs to occur? Or what type of partnership is absolutely an essential that we need to nurture and curate? I'm going to start with Dr. Chang. If you can highlight, do you want to share what you think an innovation that's necessary or a type of partnership that's essential?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question, because innovation and partnership are at the very core of what BMS and the industry is aiming to do. We are trying to innovate to find new treatments that are discovery-based through partnerships with academic and our own research labs, as well as the greater community. And I think we really strongly look forward to the Biden administration's commitment. It's just, exceedingly welcome, the Cancer Moonshot relaunch. And we look forward to partnering in that effort as we learn more details. I do think partnership, if I may expand, is at the core of what we do. A decade ago, BMS formed an international immuno-oncology network, which was a global peer-to-peer academic industry collaboration looking at research, biomarkers, new therapies, and being able to perform that partnership was just really crucial to advance to where we are today and to beyond in our partnership regarding clinical trials, because it is a academic industry partnership to be able to provide the information on clinical trials. But there is so much more to do, and we look forward to the partnership, not just with academic and industry, but with the health authorities, the public policy experts. This is a team sport. It requires everyone to do their part across the continuum, as you said, Juliet. And the innovation and partnership, they have to go hand in hand, and one does not do well without the other. So we look forward to continuing that momentum, and I do appreciate it hearing how other folks here are thinking about that as well.
Great, great, great. Okay. The phrase team sport and your highlighting of a global network, I think is something for us to take in and absorb. I'm going to turn to Dr. Palafox. Can you highlight, from your perspective, what's an innovation that's on your list or a type of partnership that you believe is essential?
Thank you. So again, as was mentioned, this is an extremely important question. So from the Pacific Islander and Native Hawaiian community perspective, I believe that representation and voice of every community, in my case, Pacific Islander Native Hawaiians, every community needs to be at the table and have an equal voice. And not only be at the table, but have an equal voice in the dialogue to establish best practices for their communities. Innovation is to be willing to engage each community to be an active part of the problem solving, discovery, and solution. So the communities are at the heart of where the problem lies. So they have to be part of the solution, the discovery, and the problem solving, and must be at the table. Now, community engagement in this way is not a new concept, and it's not even innovative. What is innovative is how to operationalize this. How to operationalize inclusivity is innovative, because I don't ever see that it's really done well. And so all stakeholders, it's multi-level, transdisciplinary, even multilateral. I mean, across the globe, we cannot solve the U.S. problem without understanding the global parts of the equation. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much. Community is heart of the solution. And I know, like you shared in your introduction, you're bringing the lens of the Pacific Islander and Native Hawaiian communities' perspective. But when you say community is the heart of the solution, I think that's probably core and applicable to all of our communities. So thanks for that. I'm going to turn to Dr. Fung. Innovation or partnership? What would you like to highlight?
Yes. So first, I wanted to comment on the Moonshot, and we were pleased to see President Biden reignite his already successful efforts to combat cancer, and we stand ready to support the president. As we all know, there is indisputable human and economic value in ending cancer as we know it. And as you may recall, the president called out diagnosing cancer sooner as being key to achieving his goals. So in terms of innovation, as the Cancer Moonshot fact sheet states, we can greatly expand the cancers we can screen for. 5 years ago, detecting many cancers at once through blood tests was a dream. But now, new technologies and rigorous clinical trials could put this within our reach. But that will require partnerships, and we agree wholeheartedly that there is a significant role for public and private efforts. Because while multi-cancer early detection science has advanced rapidly, our Medicare coverage policies have not kept pace, and these barriers mean that at FDA approval of these tests, it could still take a decade or longer for seniors who are at the highest risk of cancer to gain access. As Congress has done in the past for cervical, breast, prostate, and colorectal cancer screening, Congress needs to pass a law to enable Medicare to cover these novel types of tests once they are approved by the FDA. I think, fortunately, efforts are already underway, led by congressional leaders, the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network, and the cancer advocacy community to advance legislation that will do just that. And so, demonstrating exactly what the president articulated at the Moonshot event about the deeply bipartisan nature of cancer, the Medicare Multi-Cancer Early Detection Screening Coverage Act has bipartisan support from over 150 members of the House, including Congressman Liu. The companion bill in the Senate has 33 bipartisan sponsors. So I think working together to solve the access barriers to these new life-saving tests will ensure that the benefits of multi-cancer tests can reach as many people as possible and hopefully as quickly as possible.
Wow, thank you for that, Dr. Fung. I think you're absolutely right that policy is actually a critical component when we think about the cancer moonshot. So thank you for highlighting that. I'm going to turn to Dr. Liu. I think we're curating our great, terrific wish list here. Let me ask you, innovation or partnership or some combination of both?
Well, it has to be a combination. At the ACS, we believe that advance can only come with innovation, integration / implementation, and equity. Those three are intimately tied. In terms of innovation, as a basic scientist, I would say unraveling the genetic and biochemical complexity of cancers is really the key. We're no longer able to just pinpoint one problem. It's actually a systems problem, and that requires a very different form of science. But, to be frank with you, innovation has never been a problem in the United States. If you take example of the COVID vaccine, America was the first to develop the most effective vaccines using the most advanced technologies. But where we stumbled was in implementation and integration. And the integration occurred when there was honest brokers bringing all parties together, all companies, all public domain agencies, including the FDA, to work together to get at a fast solution. So this integration and implementation, I think, is the stumbling block. And as Dr. Palafox stated, it's no longer just public-private partnership, but community engagement simultaneously in this major mix. The big problem is who's going to be the broker? How do you go about doing it? And I think we're just in the nascent phases of being able to harness this in the best way possible. ACS has been intimately involved in this. For example, with GRAIL, we've been working with GRAIL in terms of cohort studies to see if to look at the parameters of how their really powerful tests could actually be predictive for the emergence of early cancer. The second is that our entire program, a community program, is based on delivering community needs to cancer patients within each individual community. So we've touched it all, and we understand that integration and implementation is really the key.
Great. Thanks so much for that, Dr. Liu. So following up on that, and I think you've highlighted what is happening with innovation and partnership and that continuum. And also there's room for growth and improvement. In recent years, there's a greater awareness of cancer, with public education campaigns about the signs and the symptoms, some of the common causes, testing, treatment options, and resources. We know those kinds of information or resources exist. However, I think, and we're here to talk about health equity. We know that people of color, including many different ethnicities, right, when we disaggregate and take a deeper dive, even within the greater Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander communities, some of our communities face some of the highest mortality rates, whether it's stomach, liver, breast cancers. Can you say just a little bit more? Let's try to do a rapid round here. What is one single thing we can do, we can advocate and champion to take a whole of community approach, with community partners, with government, with industry, to tackle some of these health equity issues facing our communities of color? With that, let me start here. Dr. Chang.
Yeah, so it's a morally imperative. It's a critical question because with the advances in cancer research and cancer therapy, we need to make sure that there is that there's equity in being able to provide it. And I think you raise an important point, is that the partnership has to be inclusive of everyone, including all communities. And I particularly was struck by what Dr. Palafox said regarding the partnership with the community, because that's where most of the cancer is diagnosed and treated. So, I think we all want to do our part. We need to have an open and frank discussion about the disparities and inequalities. I think within industry, the fact that there's growing awareness is a great thing. The fact that there's growing innovation in this area is a great thing. For example, BMS has committed, $150 million in our aspect to be able to improve health equity, and specifically have made grants to the Asian and Pacific Islander American Health Forum to increase awareness as well as capacity, advocacy, be able to provide linguistic support for the different communities. So I do think this is a journey. It is a long journey. I'm glad we are on this journey. And I do think each group within this journey has to be able to communicate, partner, as well as be able to provide what they can provide in whatever resources they have available to be able to provide greater equity and to be able to consolidate the advances already made in cancer research.
Great, Dr. Chang. Thanks for that. Let me ping pong over to Dr. Palafox. Do you want to follow up to that? Is there something you want to amplify or provide a different viewpoint in terms of what can we do now, starting going forward, right? Taking a whole of community approach.
So I'd like to amplify. I think points have been right on target. So, paraphrasing concepts expressed by Dr. Harold Freeman and former Congressman John Lewis, they said essentially unequal burdens of cancer and health outcomes in the U.S. and its territories are suffered by those who do not share in progress. As you noted, there has been great strides in science and healthcare, but it is not equally accessible because of design and because of social constructs that we have here in the United States. So if the Moonshot is to be successful, another way to say is we must be clear who should be invited on board and who should we ensure are on board this Moonshot in case all of the communities we're speaking of and who represent Pacific Island Native Hawaiians, all ethnic, culture, identity, age, those who suffer disparities. And specifically with science, some of this translates into creating data systems that can identify them and describe them, understand Western parents' science paradigms, and really the sense that one size does not fit all, as we've all discussed. We must tailor it to the communities and to the context. And access to healthcare through linguistic, cultural, financial, contextual support, and increasing health literacy, that's a lot of effort, but that should be part of the Moonshot. Technology adaptation, we've used actually some of the resources from some of the programs here on this call to adapt technology. For instance, a lot of the telehealth type technology, but there's many ways to do this. But I think it's that really knowing who's going to be on board and making sure they're on board the Moonshot. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'm going to look to Dr. Liu. Dr. Liu, and certainly from the ACS perspective and what ACS has been doing, what's your follow-up? What do you think we need to be mindful of in terms of taking a whole community approach?
Well, as I mentioned to you, we have a top-down, bottoms-up approach, and the bottoms-up approach is really around hearing the voices on the ground and what they need. When you talk about equity, I think one of the core problems we have in the United States, and I dare I say across the world, is really the economic inequity of access, and that's huge. And I think people talk about the problem, but unfortunately, I don't think there's been a lot of thought and experimentation going in how that should be resolved. The second issue here is following up on Dr. Palafox's comment that really personalizing the approach to each individual community becomes important. The only way we're going to be able to scale that in the view of some of the thinkers in ACS is by harnessing tech. The idea that you can actually access in different languages and different approaches, individuals, not just their communities, but the actual individuals through mediums like what we're using right now is really the key. the concept of having wearables where you don't have to schlep yourself 2 hours to get to a hospital and wait is going to be really extant to provide that care and provide equity going forward. So I think harnessing technologies that's available today and also thinking deeply about systems, particularly economic systems, will be the key for the equity framework.
Great, great, great. Thanks, Dr. Liu. So creating that personalized approach and through technology, let me look to Dr. Fung here, just closing out this part of the conversation on taking a whole of community approach. What's the latest in terms of a whole of community approach from Grail Bio, or do you want to comment and follow up on this notion of taking a personalized approach with technology so we can overcome some of these systemic barriers like language and culturally accessible information?
Yes, so you highlighted a key characteristic that we commonly see in the AAI community, which are, for example, gastric cancer, liver cancer, and so forth. And these do not have current screening paradigms. So we believe that new technologies like multi-cancer early detection tests can help reduce and halt cancer mortality disparities. But to that end, I'd like to start on the important role that policy and Congress has to play in making new technologies broadly and equitably accessible, which I think was a comment made earlier. And what we do know is, in fact, that the percentage of Medicare beneficiaries that are Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islanders is increasing every year. And so the importance of Medicare access cannot be overstated. Just recently, Representative Joyce, who chairs the Congressional Black Caucus, sent a letter to the president endorsing the Medicare Multi-Cancer Early Detection Screening Coverage Act, highlighting the opportunity for broad access to these technologies to address cancer disparities. So our hope is that congressional support will continue to grow because ultimately access will be what ensures that these technologies can achieve their full promise, especially for populations that stand to benefit the most.
Well, thank you for that, Dr. Fung. I know our time is winding here, and so as we round out our conversation, our concluding question I'd love to ask each and every one of you is what's a word or phrase that we should all hold on to when we describe the future of how we fight cancer? So a word or a phrase. And as you're thinking about what you're going to share with us, I'm just going to briefly highlight, some incredible comments and perspectives you all have shared. We've talked about translational research, the role that policy can play to tackling some of these access to care barriers. Also, the inequality of access and personalizing approach to care with technology helping to pave the way. Data systems are critical and probably are not where we want them to be. Certainly, one size does not fit all. And when we think about the diversity and the resiliency of the vastness and beauty of the AA and HPI communities writ large, I think that's especially true. This is a team sport. We need networks, including global networks. And who's going to be the broker? Who's going to help to champion that critical voices are at the table, not just sitting at the table, but really participating, innovating, and leading this conversation going forward. So thanks for letting me do a quick recap of some of my quick takeaways. Let me turn it back to all of you. What is your one word or phrase that you want us to hold on to describe the future of how we fight this fight against cancer? And with that, let me start with Dr. Palafox.
I would say community-centric approach.
Great, community-centric approach. Dr. Chang.
I'll say urgency, or ideally act with urgency. If I just expand, unfortunately, cancer is so common that it impacts all of us individually, personally. And, seeing patients, we rejoice when the new treatments are effective and treat cancer. But unfortunately, it's still a devastating disease for many, many patients. And so that, I think, is front of mind for me as to acting with urgency in our realm, in our area, to be able to advance the research, to be able to apply it to the community, and to provide equal access to all.
Great, thank you. Urgency, acting with urgency, love that. Dr. Fung.
Yeah, I think the key is access. And as we think about access, it starts at the beginning of the continuum, which means how we develop our technologies and are inclusive in our clinical studies, all the way to how does that technology actually enable more people to get their cancer screenings, and a blood-based test would obviously be quite helpful in that regard. And the third is policy. How does policy help us provide that technology to the broadest swath of the population as possible?
Great, thank you. And Dr. Liu, I'm going to give you the last word here.
But you gave me the most difficult, because all the good ideas have already been enunciated. But let me just say, I agree with everybody's point. I'm going to add one more, and that is coordinated action. We absolutely need that. And a corollary to that, or an extension to that, is the old moniker that perfection is the enemy of the good. If we're going into everything demanding perfection, we will fail. And so I would like to see, demonstration projects, a multitude of them. And for us, for coordinated action, identify the ones that really work and then highlight them and fund them more going forward.
Well, thank you for that. Coordinated action. Well, like we opened up, I was hoping and eager to learn a lot, and I really, really did. You have been just a wonderful panel. Thank you for giving me this humble privilege of trying to moderate this really, really important conversation. I want to thank you again. I want to thank the audience for joining this conversation. Wishing everybody, all our families, and our communities good health and wellness. Thank you.